Maayong hapon sa tanan again. You are here in our Zoom who's participating in our webinar, our second installment actually of the Vicente Sotto lecture series for this year 2021. Before I introduce our speaker for the welcome remarks, may I again reiterate the reminders to kindly first make sure that your mics are on mute to avoid any disruptions in the course of the program. And of course, please do not forget to answer the evaluation form before the program ends for your certificate of participation. Before anything else, also, I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Heidi Palapar. I work for Culture and Heritage in the Ramon Aboitiz Foundation Incorporated Culture and Heritage Program, and which is also a partner of the Cebuano Studies Center. But on a personal note, I have also been a recipient to many workshops and activities that the Cebuano Studies Center has organized. I'm also involved in some of site works for the center, like the translation, history project, and creative writing publications for the center. And like I said, this afternoon is the second installment of the Vicente Sotto lecture series for the year 2021. But for the benefit of those who've joined us, who have only joined now, we had our first lecture back in February 2020 with Dr. Erlinda Alburo. I remember that because if I'm not mistaken, I was the one who moderated also that first installment, which was this was held at the downtown campus, obviously before the lockdown. We resumed online in October with National Artist for Literature, Dr. Resil Mojares, followed by Professor Raymond Fernandez of UP Cebu in November. For December, the last one for 2020, we had Ma'am Luella Eslao Alex, who gave us a heartwarming and appropriately Christmas-themed discussion on Filipino and distinctly Cebuano holiday traditions. In January this year, we had Dr. Christina Juan from the University of London, who talked about the Cebuano records in the British archives. Before we do our second webinar, which is about also another set of archives, to welcome here, us formally here in our webinar and officially open the program, please welcome the Research Assistant of the Cebuano Studies Center, Mr. Charles Dominic Sanchez.
Thank you, Ms. Heidi, for those warm and welcoming words. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Sige, Bea. Thank you. Maayong hapon ka na tong tanan. A few days ago, when I first shared on my Facebook profile the poster for this event, another friend of mine on the platform, as well as a Carolinian contemporary, shared the same post on his profile with a caption beginning with the sentence, "Huge part of our history is in the archives in Spain." A well-known fact among us within the academe, lesser known and likely even taken for granted by those outside it. If you tuned into last month's installment of this lecture series, you will probably recall how a good number of questions during the open forum revolved around the ethics of this whole former colonizers still controlling much of the archives arrangement, and how, despite a recent cultural shift marked by a growing awareness among young people of just how much unlearning and decolonizing there is to do, some issues still remain somewhat dense, to use the word of our previous speaker, Dr. Christina Juan. While these universities and institutions in the global north have undeniably made great strides in making a number of these documents as accessible as possible via digitization and online archives, the fact that much of this knowledge still doesn't trickle down to non-academics in the global south, particularly young students by way of classroom material, for example, is still quite unfortunate. Amid the increasing homogeneity of a globalized world, as languages die out and centuries-old traditions and customs cease to be practiced, a sense of rootedness, of knowing where you come from, of being aware of the distinctiveness of your culture and milieu, is, I think, of great importance. In the Cebuano setting, such a sense of rootedness ought to be given greater urgency, considering how many of the aspects we tout about this province, that we are an ideal place for foreign businesses to invest in, that we speak the least accented English in the region, that we boast a globally competitive labor force, still operate within a limited economic framework. As such, many Cebuanos, severed from their past or taught to scorn it, and likely robbed of the ability to question the current state of things, make every effort to pander to and survive a system, a global order that is not of our making. This is just as true for other societies in the so called developing world, former colonies whose inhabitants were coerced into adhering to laws and mechanisms formulated by more historically advantaged cultures. Consequently, this translates into a great number of people in this day and age blaming themselves for circumstances that are often a result of events beyond their control, or deluding themselves into thinking they are empowered or entitled individuals destined to overcome adversity and sociopolitical realities that are separate from or immaterial to their being. Personally, I don't really know that much about pre colonial Filipino or Cebuano society, but the broad picture I've been able to sketch based on the readings I've consulted is one quite similar to that of other Southeast Asian cultures, but also unique in its own way. Arguably even more egalitarian than the Christianized or Hispanicized order we've been operating under for close to 5 centuries now, both in terms of gender and class. This is not to say, of course, that the pre colonial past was itself a utopia, and I advocate for a wholesale revival of the values of the time. I'm sure few of us would be agreeable to having ourselves inked for accomplishments, for every accomplishment we achieve, or for the guys having penis rings surgically inserted at the behest of our female partners. But I think there are certain traits and sensibilities that we can uncover and apply as a lens of sorts in looking at the world today, particularly in such a pivotal time as the one we are currently living through. One of the more fascinating words in the Cebuano language, in my opinion, is katalagman, a calamity, whose root word, according to John Wolfe's dictionary, is tagam, meaning to refrain from repeating an act as a result of an unpleasant experience previously undergone. In his book, The Art of Not Being Governed, An Anarchist History of Southeast Asia, anthropologist James Scott surmises how, because calamities were so much a part of the pre colonial Southeast Asian landscape, many populations likely developed their own routines of disaster or crisis repertoires, and possible examples of this included peasants having a knowledge of what famine foods to consume to tide them over during food shortages, routines for dispersal, escape, and searching for alternative means of subsistence. When I first came across this point by Scott, I immediately thought of the word katalagman and how, and this is only a supposition, it was coined or formulated within the context of learning a practice from disaster. Perhaps to Cebuano Binisaya speakers of an earlier time, a calamity, besides being an obviously tragic event, was also an occasion for learning, for developing routines and repertoire so as to mitigate the effects of a similar calamity in the future. Now, try to imagine for a second how such a sensibility would play out in contemporary times, as government agencies and officials, for example, continue to grant permits for quarrying projects in the mountains despite the knowledge that such acts cause landslides and exacerbate flooding in the lowlands, or as businessmen develop natural geographical features such as mangroves and rocky coasts into white sand beach resorts and seaside rest houses, only to be startled by the combined forces of water and wind during typhoon season. The Vicente Sotto lecture series offers that opportunity, however briefly, for the Cebuano, or really anyone with an interest for things Cebuano, to glimpse those quirks, traits, or sensibilities that make us distinctly who we are. With the hope that you take these newfound learnings not just as mere bits of trivia you can spout at the dinner table or over a drinking session, but as a unique means of viewing the world, making sense of certain phenomena, and perhaps even resisting hegemonic constructs and perceptions. Dear audience, welcome to the Vicente Sotto Lecture Series for February 2021. Daghang salamat for joining us. And before I go, allow me to take this opportunity to remind you guys about a couple of events that we have planned later this year. So I will allow me to just share screen for a moment. Okay, so the first event that we announced is the Natural Lit Online Conference, with the theme being in nature, living with literature. Uh, we announced the call for submissions earlier this month, and this is scheduled tentatively for June 30, 2021. Proposals are encouraged on but not limited to the following topics: how environmental loss or the disruption of an ecosystem are treated in a literary work, how climate disasters are addressed in literature, how a character's class or occupation affects his or her environmental views, and how the literary artist proposes a solution, if any, to the environmental issue they write about. You may send your one-page proposals for papers, poster sessions, workshops, or roundtables by the deadline has been extended to the end of March, I believe. And you may send these to either me through the email tjlcs.submissions@gmail.com or through Rafael Dean Polinar at teamcsc.events@gmail.com. Kindly include the title of your project proposal, your institutional affiliation, and contact information. Panel proposals and roundtables are acceptable and are accepted and encouraged. Audiovisual requests must accompany the proposal. And the other one is the Hinashasan workshop for young writers. Um, we also announced this earlier in the month. Uh, the University of San Carlos Cebuano Studies Center, in association with Mamugnaong Anak sa Dagang, is now accepting submissions for Hinashasan, a workshop for young writers, to be held online from April 9 to 10, 2021. That's a Friday and Saturday. The aim of this workshop is to discover and cultivate promising young literary talent from the Visayas and Mindanao. Slots shall be reserved exclusively for writers from or currently enrolled in schools in these parts of the country who are 25 years of age or younger. Interested applicants may submit a suite of 3 to 5 poems or one 5 to 8 page short story written in either English or Cebuano. Entries must be typed in Times New Roman, font size 12 with 1 inch margin on all sides, double spaced, and must not bear the author's name. Applicants are required to submit their resume with a scanned 2x2 ID picture. A statement of intent providing a short background of their literary interest should also accompany the application. Submissions must be sent as attachments in Word format with the following subject header, and also to the same email address I showed earlier, tjlcs.submissions@gmail.com. So a maximum of 20 slots are allocated for workshop fellows, and the deadline for submissions is March 19, 2021. That's a Friday. The final list of fellows will also be announced by the end of the same month. So we've already started receiving submissions for this workshop, and we will go over these when the vetting process commences after the deadline. So once again, daghang salamat to everyone who is joining us, and may we all have a fruitful afternoon.
Daghang salamat, Charles. You also gave us several food for thought there, and thank you for also putting into context the reason why we have these lecture series and the many things that we do in the Cebuano Study Center. It would be a katalagman, a catastrophe also if we do not take this opportunity despite these very difficult times to further our researches, our knowledge about Cebuano culture and heritage and Cebuano identity. Uh, and this afternoon's lecture will certainly add, no, and to our knowledge and to our studies about Cebuano identity. And it's a very interesting one. But before we go to the lecture proper, by the way, it seems that Cebuano Study Center has also hit the ground running in 2021 with all the two big activities already set for the year. Please don't forget, to those who are interested, to join the online conference on the environment natural lit. Note the deadline, please. And we have also the soon to happen, no, the Hinashasan workshop for young writers. For those who are very interested to have their works critiqued, reviewed by writers themselves, this is an opportunity. Now, before we go to our lecture proper, as I said, we have, as we did in all previous lectures, we have invited Dr. Bea Yap Martinez to give us a brief primer on the person and works of Vicente Sotto, after whom this lecture is named. Lecture series is named. Today, Bea will focus on the politics of Don Vicente Sotto. Bea Yap Martinez has a PhD in English with concentration in literary studies from the Silliman University. She is the recipient of the 2020 NCCA Dissertation Research Award and the 2021 NCCA Competitive Grants Program. She teaches undergraduate and graduate courses at the University of San Carlos and serves as the Deputy Director of the Cebuano Studies Center. Please welcome Dr. Bea Martinez.
Hello, good afternoon, Miss Heidi. Thank you. And thank you for all our participants who are joining us today. So today I will be talking about the political life of Vicente Sotto, a very interesting one. Vicente Sotto entered politics at the turn of the century when Filipino intellectuals inhabited a sort of time between times. Previous to that, there had been a build-up in the build-up of nationalism in the late 19th century through the works of Jose Rizal and the propagandists that led to the Philippine Revolution and the eventual collapse of the Spanish regime. But the full birth of the Philippine Republic, however, was aborted because of the coming of the Americans, and Filipinos were once again faced with the challenge of a new colonial power. Vicente Sotto is described by Russell Mojarras to be the most militant and aggressive of the Filipino advocates for the country's complete and immediate independence in the first decades of the 20th century. He attacked ferociously and fought ferociously for our complete and immediate independence. He entered the public life through his journalistic activities when he founded La Justicia, a Spanish weekly which was critical of the US occupation in the Philippines. His contributions were so important that when the Philippine-American War in Cebu broke out, he sent out a missive to the resistance troops in the hills asking if he could join them, and was sent back word that he would be of more use continuing his publications in Cebu, or in the city. So his journalistic activities against the US occupation eventually led to his incarceration in Fort San Pedro. But Soto's incarceration did not stop him from fighting for complete Philippine independence. After his release, he founded more newspapers, this time using the pen name Tagakota to write, and eventually established the first newspaper in Cebuano, Ang Suga. Through his newspapers, he came to be known as an advocate of citizens' rights. During this time, Soto was with the Nacionalista Party, serving as the first vice president of the party's city committee, and his Angsuga was the party's mouthpiece. He was not, however, in the race, as brokers in the party felt he was too controversial a person and thought his brother, Philemon Soto, a more appropriate choice. Another prominent member in this party was Sergio Josmeña, who would later become the president of the Philippines and would also play a large role in the life of Vicente Sotto. The Nacionalistas dominated the Philippine Assembly elections of July 30, 1907, countrywide and in Cebu, with Sergio Osmeña at its head. From the very beginning, Sergio Osmeña and Vicente Sotto were natural rivals. Russell Mojares writes, and allow me to read at length, both ambitious and highly motivated, and practically of the same age, with Soto only a little over a year older than Osmeña, claiming the same city as their turf, yet different in temperament and intellectual persuasions, they were odd allies at the beginning of their political careers, with Soto supporting Osmeña in the latter's gubernatorial campaign in 1905. In 1907, it was Osmeña Soto asked to do the introduction of his book, Código Municipal, and they traded compliments in their prefaces, with Soto speaking of Osmeña's extraordinary qualities of leadership, and Osmeña praising Soto's sense of civic duty. Yet the break may have set in as early as 1907, as it was a pivotal year for both. It was the year that saw the blossoming of Osmeña's career and also saw Soto's career aborted. Now, Soto was a logical rival to Osmeña. Of Osmeña's age group, it was Soto who more or less paralleled his achievements, his fame, his zeal, and intelligence. Yet in style and temperament, they were so different. Soto was reckless, restless, and driven by ideas. Osmeña was deliberate, cautious, and goal-oriented. While Soto's El Pueblo was dynamic, fiery, impulsive, and sometimes careless, Osmeña's El Nuevo Dia was conservative, sophisticated, elitist, and rarely incautious. While Soto linked up with such volatile, marginal, and unorthodox groups as labor unions and the Aglipayans, Osmeña was consolidating his position within the Cebuano social and economic elite. While Soto found himself waylaid by court suits and other problems, Sergio Osmeña steadily moved forward, and as early as 1905, Osmeña was already cementing contacts with Manila-based leaders of the Nacionalista Party. And in October 1906, he gained national stature when he was elected presiding officer of the Convention of Provisional Governors in Manila. With his election as Speaker of the Assembly on October 16, 1907, and thus the highest Filipino official in the country, Osmeña was a full-blown national leader and was well on his way towards consolidating control of Cebu. Soto, on the other hand, his career was halted with his scandal in 1907. And when things were going badly for him at the Supreme Court in Manila, Soto hurriedly left Cebu for Manila and eventually Hong Kong, and he was not to return until 9.5 years later. After Soto returned from his 7-year exile in Hong Kong, and one of our previous speakers gave a talk on a sort of travelogue on Soto's 7-year exile in Hong Kong, he founded the newspaper The Independent and picked up once again his slogan of the restoration of the Philippine Republic, pushing that the Philippines should be given immediate independence from the US. And during this time, he became one of the leaders of the Democrata Party, which was the opposition party of the Nacionalista Party. And this party, the Democrata Party, was described by Mojares as a ragtag minority that drew together men who were like Soto in temper and persuasion. They were former revolutionaries, journalists, propagandists, labor leaders, social radicals, and traditional oppositionists. This move put him in opposition with fellow Cebuano Sergio Osmeña, with whom he was previously affiliated with in the Nacionalista Party before he was exiled. But the climate and attitude towards independence had changed while he was gone. And Mojares writes that when Soto left the Philippines in 1907, the spirit of anti-American resistance was still strong, such that he could dream in Hong Kong of a people once more rising up in arms. When he returned in 1914, the mood of resistance had so given away that Soto's slogan for the restoration of the Philippine Republic already seemed vaguely archaic. Soto, however, never placed much of a premium on party affiliation. He was very much an individual voice who did not gather around him a party or a movement, and in this way he remained essentially powerless since he occupied only the peripheries of policymaking. This does not mean that Soto and the Democrata Party were inconsequential, as they helped to, in the words of Resel Maharas, create a climate of critical public opinion against which the actions of the ruling nationalistas could be measured and judged. They counteracted the nationalistas' tendency to compromise on issues of immediate and complete independence and on issues of social justice. Maharas notes that Soto charged Osmeña and Quezon with foisting a deception on the Filipino people with their self interested manipulation of the independence issue. He charged that the nationalista leaders were exploiting the issue to perpetuate themselves in power, that while Osmeña and Quezon were fiery in their independence demands at home, they were submissive and compliant in Washington, and that in truth, Osmeña and Quezon had an effective plan for the independence campaign, but were handling it with an eye for how they could advance their political fortunes at home. Soto was extremely popular in Cebu, serving as congressman of the 2nd District of Cebu from 1922 to 1925, where he tried to translate his populist sympathies into legislative measures. Most of his legislative measures, however, were blocked by the nationalistas and were never really carried out. But to give an idea of what he did during his term as a congressman and in public service, he pushed to scrap the head tax, lower land tax, exempt idle lands from taxation, and abolish the tax on rice, introduce bills to create an anti-graft commission, reduce the salaries of representatives and senators, enforce an 8-hour workday, abolish the death penalty, provide for divorce, lower the minimum voting age requirement to 18, empower the government to buy big landed estates for distribution to tenants, liberalize the law on libel, grant women the right to vote, move for the appointment of a woman as one of the appointed representatives in legislature. He also pushed for a minimum daily wage for public works employees, the provision of free night classes for workers in Manila and in provincial towns, requirement of proper advance notices for the termination of workers. He defended the victims of military abuses, workers, dancehall bailarinas, and peasant rebels. He had a special interest in prisoners' rights. In later years, he said that he saved around 107 people from the electric chair in the course of his legal career. He also placed the premium on the emancipation of the individual. For this reason, he strongly advocated pro-labor laws, tenants' rights, land redistribution, women's rights, and divorce. He saw education as the key agent in social and moral change. Now, it was not until 1925 that Soto decided to run for senator. Although he lost to the candidate of the Nacionalista Party, this was to be the trend for the next couple of elections. He attributed his losses to the money and power of Osmeña, whose camp he charged with widespread vote buying. Soto was not to win a senatorial seat until the 1946 elections after the Japanese occupation in Manila. During this time, he also served as the chairman of the Senate Committee on Finance until his death in 1950. As a senator, he authored the Press Freedom Law, which was enacted in 1946, which protected journalists from being forced to name their news sources. Now, despite his popularity, Mojares notes that Soto's case demonstrated that reputation and popularity alone do not win elections in the Philippines. However, Soto kept running because he saw the elections as a mode of political action. It was, and I quote, an arena for discussion of ideas, for popular education, and in many of his electoral fights, a mode not just of winning or gaining office, but of demonstrating an alternative politics, one that relied on debate and discussion rather than payoffs and horse trading. Thus, he waded into political combat again and again, even when the odds were stacked against his favor. Vicente Sotto stood firmly in his nationalistic values and was consistently critical of the colonial mentality of the Philippines. He criticized values that stood in the way of Filipinos becoming a community of free, independent, and productive citizens. He fought for the emancipation of the individual, and he attacked all forms of foreign economic domination in the Philippines. Muharis notes, to close this short presentation, that Soto was elected councilor, mayor, representative, constitutional convention delegate, senator, served twice as Philippine delegate to the UN General Assembly, yet these do not add up to the full sum of his political life at all. Thank you.
Daghang salamat, Dr. Bea Martinez. It's very interesting to know that we have to thank Soto, one of the people we have to thank for pushing for labor rights and women's rights. And we will be getting, I think, another aspect of Vicente Sotto's life in the next lecture series, right? But this one is about politics. Thank you again, Dr. Bea Martinez. Now, before we go to our much awaited part of the program, we would like to show appreciation for Dr. Martinez for taking time off her busy schedule to provide us with a glimpse of the life of Vicente Sotto, and this time, of course, about his politics. So allow me to read the text of the Certificate of Appreciation for Dr. Martinez for her lecture entitled The Political Life of Vicente Sotto during the Vicente Sotto Lecture Series 2021, given this 27th day of February 2021 via Zoom. Signed, the University Vice President for Academic Affairs, Father Jesuraj Anthonyapen, SVD, PhD, and of course the Director of the Cebuano Studies Center, Dr. Hope Sabanpan, UP. And thank you again, Dr. Martinez. Now we have reached the part where we will now introduce our esteemed speaker for this afternoon's webinar. But before that, I'd just like to remind again everyone to not forget to fill out their evaluation form, which can be seen actually in the chat box below. Your certificate of participation will be sent via email after you have submitted the evaluation form. Also, and definitely, I think you will have certain questions or certain comments about our topic this afternoon. Please feel free to type them in the chat box, and we will do our best to address as many of these during the open forum. And so, without further ado, let me introduce our speaker for our second installation for this Vicente Sotto Lecture Series 2021. He's none other than Jobers, or more formally, Jose Eleazar R. Bersales, who is the director of the University of San Carlos Museum, manager of the University of San Carlos Press, and the head of the USC Communications Office. He's also a full professor at the USC Department of Anthropology, Sociology, and History. He holds a PhD in anthropology with an archaeology dissertation from the University of San Carlos on a sandwich program with the New Mexico State University in Las Cruces, New Mexico, USA. It was at NMSU that Jobers trained in the archaeology of Central American Maya in Belize and Guatemala. Jobers was also a German academic exchange scholar at the University of Bielefeld from 1997 to 1999, and an Asia Research Institute ASEAN graduate scholar at the National University of Singapore in 2006. He also trained in GIS in archaeology at the Larenstein University of Professional Education in the Netherlands in 2007 under a Dutch MHO grant. Dr. Bersales was once a national president of UGAT, the Anthropological Association of the Philippines. Currently, he heads the National Committee on Museums of the National Commission for Culture and the Arts, or NCCA, and is the Cebu Provincial Consultant for Museum and Heritage Affairs. He is also a member of the Cebu Archdiocesan Commission for Culture and the Arts and the Cebu City Cultural and Historical Affairs Commission. Joe Burst has written or co-authored a number of heritage books, including Salapi, The Numismatic Heritage of the Philippines, which won an Anvil Platinum and Anvil Gold in the 50th Anvil Awards 2014, as well as The War in Cebu, a finalist in the 2016 National Book Awards. He is currently writing a book on the archaeology of Cebu for the National Quincentennial Committee, and he is a sought-after speaker for a lot of webinars about Cebuano history, about culture, about heritage. In fact, yesterday we just met for another webinar. I was also moderating it and he was our speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dr. Jose Eleazar Bersales. Hi, sir.
Hello, good afternoon. Good afternoon, Heidi. We meet again.
Balik na sa tani, sir.
Thank you for the introduction. The talk will be, people will probably wonder what's an archaeologist doing in history. My master's degree, actually, I forgot to mention, is Philippine Studies from the University of Philippines Asian Center in Diliman. So that probably explains why I have this interest in broad strokes of Philippine history. My presentation this afternoon, I'll go directly to the presentation. It's I hope this will just be brief, but I'll just present because the last lecture was by Dr. Tina Martinez Juan, and it was about the archival collections in Britain, in the United Kingdom. And in 2015, I was fortunate to go to Spain with Father Jun Rebaila to digitize the Augustinian archives, the records in Cebu at the Archivo Agustiniano de la Provincia Agustiniana de Filipinas. And so this is going to be the talk that I will present. By the way, the entire collection that we digitized is at the Cebuano Studies Center. It's in digital form, and there's also hard copies. We also printed hard copies of all the images that were presented that we digitized. Okay, wait. And pictures are cool. Okay, now, so this is the Real Colegio de Agustinos Filipinos in Valladolid, in Spain, in the central portion, in the cooler port, even in I think it's higher part of Spain. It's a bit colder, even if it's summer. No? This portion here, where you have this window, this windows is wait, here is where the archives is located. This section here. And in 2015, when we went there, Father Policarpio Poli Hernandez was the archivist. I think there's another Augustinian friar from the Philippines, from Cebu, I think. Father Fray Bore, I forgot his name, who's doing history dissertation right now at the Augustinian monastery in Valladolid. So that's Father Poli. The records at the Augustinian archives actually cover about 11, no? And you can read them. The Holy See, and the orders the orders that were issued by the Vatican, the superior government or the civil government of the Philippines, the General Curia in Rome of the Augustinians, the governance of the Augustinian province, which is in the Philippines, and dioceses in the Philippines, members of the missions, the commissarios, towns and parishes of the Philippines, index of authors, provincial houses, and the provinces of the Augustinians. No? And then a special record on China and Japan, the religious orders there. Okay, this is part of the room where you are not allowed to get inside when you do your research. You'll only be outside. It's Father Poli or whoever is the archivist now that will bring you the records you desire. Now, unfortunately, I think the records are not yet digitized. So they're not only about Cebu. You have all the Augustinian missions in the Philippines, no? Pampanga, Cavite. They were all over, no? Because they were the first religious missionary order that came to the Philippines. No? All the others came about 40 years later. Okay. So that's Father June. Let me introduce our photographer, Father June Rebaila, on the left, and that's Father Poli. You can see a section of the cabinets, no? In the room where you will be allowed to do your research. The Cebu records, according to Father Poli, when we left 5 days later, we were really in a rush, just taking pictures of everything, regardless of what they meant. No? Just taking pictures page by page, no? Using a camera, because we had no scanner. If we used a scanner, it would have taken us months to do this. So automatic, Father Chun brought 2 cameras with him, and we would put the document on the table, and he would take a picture. Lower desk, not this one, lower one. And fortunately, the images were very good. They're like products of the machine-made digitalization equipment. All in all, according to Father Poli, we digitized 70%. We were supposed to go back there in October, courtesy of the National Archives of the Philippines, but COVID happened, so we were not able to go. There was supposed to be a documentation of the archives, the religious archives of Spain by the National Archives of the Philippines, especially this one, and the Franciscan Archives in Madrid, which contain photographs and records, especially because the last Bishop of Cebu before the Americans came was Bishop Martin Garcia Alcocer, was a Franciscan, no? And apparently he had all these photographs of Cebu in 1898, 1897. Beautiful, no? So we were able to digitize 72 folios, covering 4,104 pages in 4 days, with 4 maps and 2 designs, 2 plans. You must remember that when you go to Spain, Spain goes to sleep, and there is a siesta between 11:30 and 4 o'clock, 2 o'clock. In our case, it was, I think, 2 o'clock, yes, or 3 o'clock. So everything closes there in the Augustinian archive. So you come in at 9 o'clock, Father Poli opens everything, presents a catalog card, shows, explains what the content is. We take a picture at 11:30, he comes back and he says, time for lunch. And then there's mass at the church beside the part of the archive. So we go to church and then we go lunch. And then we go around, and this was November, it was very cold. So you can just imagine waiting until 3 o'clock in the afternoon to go back to the archives. And at 4:30, okay, the archives is closed. So very, very little time. So it's a good thing that we were able, I think, to digitize this and bring the collection to the University of San Carlos Cebuano Study Center. And we're supposed to have an agreement with the National Archives of the Philippines to share the digital collection with them. We sent a copy of the digital files to the Augustinian Archives. I don't really know if the files arrived. We did not receive any response, but I should ask Father Bore if the CDs we sent did arrive in the archives. No? Anyway, you don't need to go for the 70% of the records. You don't need to go to Spain. Well, if you go to Spain, go to the Valladolid archives. No? But you don't need, because there's a Cebuano Study Center for 70% of the records. Now, the first record presented to us was record number 1, the APAP, APAP 1, Archivo de la Provincia Agustiniana de Filipinas. It's dated June 1599. It's only a short line. It's the creation of the convent of Siaro during the capital, the chapter of the Augustinians in 1599 in June. The date of the establishment of, of the entry is 23 June 1599. That's when San Nicolas, the first mission parish after the Basilica of Santo Niño Church or Monasterio de San Agustin. Then you have the San Nicolas, no? And then San Nicolas was, the Karkar was separated from San Nicolas. Now people will always tell you the oldest parish is Bantayan. No? Bantayan was was a mission station under the Manila Augustinians, not the Augustinians of Cebu, and it was Bantayan was only transferred to the Augustinians in Cebu, the mission here, in the early 1600s. The first mission parish was actually San Nicolas officially, and then you have Siaro, or what is now Valladolid in Karkar, no? Sialo, and it was excavated by John Peterson, my colleague, the archaeologist John Peterson, in 2004. They discovered the floors of the old parish church, Visita there. No, it's privately owned now. An important record in the archives, okay, records in the archive is this one, which is published in the Philippine, forthcoming in the Philippine Quarterly of Culture and Society. The treatise for the repair and maintenance of the Basilica or the Santo Niño, Monasterio de Convento de Santo Niño. Here is a manual for the first time, dated to 1735, on how the church was constructed, what was used. No, it's about 20, 30 pages. My good friend Don Santiago Porras at the University of Seoul in Korea did a dissertation on this, and his article on the translation of this and an explanation on, because Fray Juan de Albaran was not an architect, but he leaves us with a documentation about how the church was constructed. An important part that he mentions there is, mga Indios kuno, Indios, bantayan na ninyo when they cut coral stone from Mactan, because mag-inom nga like tuba, they will drink tuba, they get drunk, they will fool you, no? They will karga, ihap ka sa mga tabliya, the blocks of coral stone at limestone cut from Mactan, ipatong sa Baroto para itabok to the other side sa Opon, to Cebu City, the ciudad where the church was under construction. Pero iniglingiw nimo nasa mo kuha sa bato, no? Patong sa baroto na mo kuha. Pag kumanin mo ihap, tuyo krakan, sige. Tingalan ka nga, di ko na maabot, abot dito, gamay rin mo abot. Nadagang kag nalista. Kaya mga maro, kuno kayo ng mga Indio. No? Inigtalikod ni mo, puli-puli, ang tangon ng kuha niya, ihap na sa kagbalik sa imong giihap na di ay. He mentions those things there. Very interesting. And then this is contained actually in a document 316. So I'm using the catalog numbers used in the archivo. It's 316/1, where you later I will show you also 3 maps that are mentioned there. Now, an important document in the archives is this one, though. In 1804, Father Fray Ambrosio Otero orders to recall an account on the discovery of the Santo Niño by Legazpi. I think the records were in Spain, and this came from the monasterio here in Cebu. No, wait, I should give you a background. In 1897, Father Eduardo Navarro already started sensing, no, maklaro na nila nga, murag magrevolusyon man tingali, no, or 1893. They were already collecting the Filipiniana books of the Philippines, because they were sensing that something bad was going to happen to the Philippines. No? And so they started collecting records. 1897, 30,000 pages of the records in Manila, and I think some in Cebu, were brought to Spain at the chapter house in Goya Street, Madrid. Unfortunately, and this is very important, unfortunately, during the Civil War, around 1934 to 37, the Spanish Civil War, the Goya chapter house was burned, included in the burn, the damage, the destroyed were the 30,000 pages of documents. Now, I think my feeling is when those documents, some of those in the monasterio in Cebu, when they were brought out, copies were already made in here, in the in 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 the monasterio, in the basilica, so that when the Augustinians left in the during the, the revolution, after the revolution, some of those copies were left here, no, and for some reason they were brought out again during the American period, and these are the ones that survived and are now in the Archivo de la Provincia Agustiniana de Filipinas. There are, I think, also records at the basilica today in Cebu, but the bulk of those records are here. And you find this one. This is probably also the time when there was a claim from their brother recollects, which continues to this day, that the Santo Niño was found in San Nicolas. No, I think this is the beginning of that kind of controversy. I'm not sure, really, but the order to retranscribe those records and recall all the old records on the finding of the Centennial are done during this period, or 1804, during this year, no? Where they start retranscribing or transferring these records. And beautiful is the illuminated cover, no, of the Santo Niño, the finding of the Santo Niño, upon the orders of Fray Ambrosio Otero. Yung illustration. This is the cover also of the book, The Feast of the Santo Niño, by the national artist Dr. Asil Mohanes. There is also another translation or notarized transcript of the measurements, I think, of the Santo Niño, which is about 7 pages. It discusses the circumstances of the finding of the Santo Niño. It was done in 1736, but it's based on 1565 records. Unfortunately, the records, the cover is very brittle, and you will see it exhibited at the what is this, Museo Oriental, which is the museum of the Augustinians, which is also located at the basement of the same monasterio. So if you go to the monasterio in Valladolid, you must also go to the Museo Oriental, and you must see this this original. Okay, the one we photographed was already black and white, because we were told that it's on display downstairs at the Museo Oriental, and brittle na siya kayo. If you notice, the black and white now, naguba na siya. No. Why was there a notarization? You must read the 4 articles of Astrid Salabosa in a Philippine Quarterly of Culture and Society, 2006 volume. There's a volume there where she explains, this is part of her doctoral dissertation at the University of San Carlos Department of Anthropology, Sociology and Anthropology, where she defends the finding of the Santo Niño right there at the Santo Niño Basilica, where the Basilica is located, and not at San Nicolas. One of the documents she used is this one. Okay. Now, other records, well, again, another set of records, transcription of the original document of the finding of the Santo Niño done in 1733. So you keep on getting these records where they are recalled by other friars. Now, a lot of the records of Cebu are about donations to the Santo Niño convent, which later became the famous friar lands in Cebu, the Manilad friar lands, and the Talisay Minglanilla staff. Excuse me. I ate something very hot. I had a soup, a Japanese soup, spicy soup, and I'm still sneezing from the chili. Anyway, it was delicious. So you have all these donations by people who are about to die. No? At the same, so you have this one, and then this one are the deed of properties of Francisco Montealegre and his wife Doña Isabel Gonzalez. Now, in the 16th centuries, no, 17th, 18th centuries, I think the wala pa mausap no ang wala pa ma-standardize ang mga spelling sa Spain. I think it's only in the 19th century nga gi-standardize, nag-usab, nga gipatangtang na ng use of G, the hard G to represent the J. No? Kanang hinatilan, for example, is spelled in the 17th century spelling. In the 19th century spelling, it should be J. No? Ginatilan, English ginatilan, but hinatilan with a J. But if you go to the 17th, 16th, 15th, 14th, 12th century, ang letter G nga gahi Gonzales also is used for G, just as Isabel, letter Y, it can be spelled as an I or a Y. And the E or E sa Spanish and, anang panahon ng mga E pa, letter E. So these are nuances that you have to understand when you read Spanish documents. And I'll give you a reading kang Una Paredes later, with Dr. Una Paredes, when she was at Kyoto University, where she explains how to read 17th, 16th century manuscripts, which are different, which are written differently, no? And the words used may be spelled differently from the modern Spanish. Okay, so here's another one now. At the same time, the Convento de Santo Niño was renting out these properties at Talisay, at Tinglanilla, at Banilan, no? And they would have demand letters. You will see here many demands, many suits. Some of them are lawsuits filed, no, to ask debtors to pay ang pagrent nila sa mga yuta. Usually sugarcane plantations or plantations planted to palmas. Later they would call them cocos or tuba, diretso, no? Tubaan or kasukaran, or in Minglanilla, humayan, no? Mga palay. They would call them palay. And sa Manila, sa mga sugarcane farms and in the area where we live, there's a Santo Niño village. Napasa kayo hantod karon, mga rice fields, no? O sugarcane. And then here's another one, acceptance by the Santo Niño community on an inheritance by Kapitan Don Francisco Ruiz de Avila. Sa karaan manggod ang imong ang nauna nila na mag-donate ka sa simbahan, well, dili inauna. Mag-donate ka sa simbahan ay perpetual prayers for you, ampuan ka kay makasasala kay kas panahon nimo diri sa kalibutan. So donate yun ka, no, sa basilika kay para ampuan ka, perpetual prayers. And then here is an official document in 1606 from the Real Audiencia de Filipinas, granting the request of Capitan Cristobal Espinosa de los Monteros for an estate within the borders of San Nicolas. Na siya nga mga records, which are not necessarily related to directly related to the convent, but for some reason it's there. It must be because this would be later used for later inheritance donations to the Santo Niño, which means dunay usaan nga pariente pa ka, asawa, apo ni Cristobal Espinosa de los Monteros later nga mo donate nya ma-attach ning tanang mga previous records of the property. Kay grabe ang records keeping sa Santo Niño convent about these properties. And you'll understand later because I think Dr. Calinay, as Dr. Calinay has said in previous lectures and in written, the city government, the ciudad, the cabildo of Cebu around the 1860s started to be alarmed when they realized that the whole of Cebu up to Talisay and Manila, Dalamban was owned by the Augustinians. Ang nabili na lang, kini na lang for San Pedro, kanang arsobispado, kanang katedral, kanang diha. After anang kolon sa Nicolas, akas kolon nga street, puro na basilika ang property kanang San Carlos main karon. As part of the convent properties, na surprise ang city government, Cabildo ngano, the basilica was able to present at the Santo Niño Monastery, the convent. I keep referring to the basilica because that's what it's called now. But the convent was able to present all kinds of documentation to show that they rightfully owned those properties. Of course, when Americans came 1907, Taft went to the Vatican to buy the friar lands. No? Now, you mention of friar lands make you angry. You must realize there was no such thing as problem with not much problem with friar lands compared to the, well, no offense to our fellows at UST, but compared to the Dominicans, the Dominican friar lands in Katagalugan, there was so much problem there. Here, apparently, there was not much. No? That's why it was very difficult for the Katipuneros to recruit in Cebu because they could not find any problems. Kasagarang rentiers sa mga properties, mga dato na daan, no? Who would later become our mestizos Angles, the Chinese mestizos, whose many of whom still own former friar lands when they were sold by the Vatican to the American government, in the early 1900s. So titles of coconut lands owned in Talisay requested by Fray Juan de Borja. This is of interest to someone I know who is writing a history of Talisay, si Marbs Bascon. I think he's watching right now, si Marben. This 132 pages contains all these lists of names of owners of properties. No na mga apelyidos ang uban, pero I don't know if nausap nilang apelyidos afterwards. No? Kay daghan siyang alista. And this is in the 1700s. I forgot to put the date. This is actually in the 1700s, a listing of property owners. You will notice 1700s this year because of the way the handwriting is. No, if you look at the handwriting, like this one, my God, parang usara ka sentence, walay hunong. Sumpay kada words. No? You must be careful. You'll understand this is 1600s, 1700s. Yeah. Writing. Lahi na pag 1900s. At least klaro na kayang pagkasuwat pa. Dili parihaan nga. Marag usara ka sentence yan. Period ayon. Napo ka lines. Anyway, you'll get to, as you read more documents, you get to understand them better. It's like hearing a language for the first time. When you're already in a place for 1 year, you'll be able to understand. So probably you'll be able to understand this. But it's good to access this. You have all the properties, identification of the mohones, kanang mohon sa kada, and then the old names of the places, places in there. Then you have in 1636, Testimonio de Documento acerca de distribución de la caja de comunidad, which is the community chest, or when the funds that are collected by the friars na magamit sa mga Indios, mga natibo, kung maglisod sila, kung na sila kinahanglan. Now, this is really 1600s writing, and it's hard if you're not used to reading Spanish words. It's hard to separate one word from the other. Kaya gisumpay-sumpay na kasagaran. Pero pag-testimonyo de documento acerca de la distribución de la caja de comunidad, pak, ana, pronounce na swar mo ng-German, ngay combine ang tulo ka words, may mong adjective. No? Ana. So, magbantay ka niya. Daghan kayong siyang the many abbreviations. That's why later I will ask you to download a book which tells you how to read the abbreviations of the 17th, 16th, up to the 12th centuries. No? Okay. Here in 1730, there's another 250 pages. No, suit. This is the beginnings of the kaning earnest desire of the Augustinians, I think, to suppress the mestizos Angles of Parian. You know from the lectures of Dr. Calinane that in the 1830s, an Augustinian bishop sat in the Diocese of Cebu, Bishop Santos Gomez Marañon, and what did he do? He filed a case to close the Parian church because nobody was going to the cathedral. It looked like a barn, whereas the Parian church was so beautiful, was enriched by people who were selling products in Manila, making money because Manila had just been opened to the world trade, and then during the Manila Galleon, they supplied products, agricultural products to Manila and all that. Nadato ng mga kanilang simbahan. Here is a demand for the restoration to the convent of lands in the Parianes, Los Angeles. And my God, 250 pages of the documents just to demand a return of the property. So You can consult that also if you're interested in the beginnings of this wrangle between Augustinians and the diocese, the Augustinians representing the diocese and the Mestizo Sangles. Here is in 1734, as a minor controversy, I think in Argao, the bishop opted that the ministry in Argao, because there was a time when, well, Argao was always an Augustinian mission, but there was 10 years in the around this one, 1742, that the Jesuits take over. No, but this is Fray Barganio, vice provincial, explaining why the ministry in Argao or the priest in Argao should have his residence in the town against what the bishop opted, which is to have residence in another area. It's a short document, 7 pages. Now, we also have a copy of Governor Valdez Itamon at the request of Fray Busquet, exempting the residents of San Nicolas, Carcar, and Buluon from rendering services in the construction of the damaged Santo Niño Church. Nasunog siya 1733, I think. So, nag-reconstruction. And later, I'll show you an interesting document related to this. Here is a suit or demanda filed by the Principalia of Liloan, Visita of San Nicolas, against those of the town of Mandaue. This is proof that Liloan is older than the town of Consolacion, of course. No? Because the borders, this is a dispute over borders, over the mohon between the town of Mandaue, which was under the Jesuits, and the town of Liloan, which at this time was under the Augustinians or Augustinian Recollects. No? It's also very thick, 185 pages. If you're from Liloan, I would suggest you read this. Get 185 people to read 1 page each and translate each, reading each, because my God, this will take an entire lifetime to read, I tell you, if you're not a native speaker of Spain, of Espanol. No? And even those who are native speakers of Espanol find it hard to read as document written in the 1700s. No? And then here is an affidavit at the request of Fray Juan de Albaran on the participation of the Jesuits in the administration of Mandaue, which at this time was under Augustinian jurisdiction. There was a time, I think, that part of Mandaue was under Augustinian. That's for some reason. So this is an important document. And another 388 pages dated 1745. And I'm just translating the Traslado Auténtico de Títulos y Mercedes Partes de las blah, 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 which is authentic transfer of the titles and royal grants of the haciendas in the province of the Santísimo Nombre de Jesus owned by the Augustinians. Those haciendas are three. No, actually 2. Banilan Talamban, the hacienda de Banilan Talamban. Talamban at this time being Mabolo. Dili ka ng Talamban karon. Mabolo pa na tanaw ang ngalan sa Talamban. Mo pa na ang iyang sentro, ang parokya. Kunya, kuan ang pikas Minglanilla, Talisay Minglanilla. The other side, sugarcane and rice. On the other side, sugarcane and a little bit of rice. Belonging to the convent of Cebu with the corresponding measurements made by Commission on Indulgences, including the composition of properties in the year 1699. If you're interested in looking at names of places, the titles, the people who owned properties, in what was planted, how much was planted per this property and all that, this is the book that you should consult. No? Yeah, the copies are at the Cebuano Study Center. There are hard copies of this also, if you don't like the digital file. 316/1, another 186 pages with cowhide cover, is an inventory of the papers and reports of the Santo Niño. These are events. These are events in the province, in the provincia, the Augustiniana in Cebu, and also inventory of what's inside the churches, and not a specific inventory of churches, but of the monasterio, no? And what is being spent, how much is spent, and all that. It's a very thick document. Also, it would be good to read it. It would be good if you're studying, for example, properties, the economy of Cebu during this period. This is the one, and the other book. Now, on this documentation, on this on this book, when you open, you are immediately brought after the introduction, what is its contents, indice, and index. You are immediately shown this two pages, 6 long pages of the map, probably the oldest colorized map of the city of Cebu, the ciudad, no, as it is called, the Spanish city, and this is the Compañía de Jesus. This is the Seminario Colegio San Carlos, which is now Jollibee, no, and Jollibee, and across it is Toyota, which used to be Immaculada, no, Toyota, the big Toyota in MJ Cuenco, very near here, and I think this is the cathedral. No, it's this is the fort. No, so yeah, this is the Jesuit church. Wa pa masumpay ang campus. Kani ang Plaza Independencia diri. Then that's the fort. Ano, dako kaayo ang basilica nga property, then ang cathedral diri. Okay. Now, I gave a copy to Dr. Kalinay. He listed down all the names of these civilians that used to own those properties. Eventually, they would be owned by this one. They would be donated to the Jesuits so that the Seminary Colegio San Carlos will expand. Dako kayo, no? And then i-reclaim ni Padre Julia mo na ng friendly care karon nga naigo sa linog. Sirado di ay buak ang building. No? Unya, ano yung mga tracks. And then behind that mo na kumpanya used to be the oil mill, Madrigal oil mill, destroyed in World War II. But the Madrigal house is still there, standing. So all of these were eventually donated, some, not all, but some of them to the Basilica. Now, if we press further, you see a closer inspection of Segunda Mapa. No? This is the symbols of the Augustinians. No? The flaming heart, pierced with an arrow. That's Augustinian. And this is, of course, monogram of the Jesuits. No? Kana siya. So Jesuit property, wala pa ma-continue. Mapagin napay usa nga hold over nga mapagin mo donate or pa mo baligya sa iyang property. And then the Plaza de Armas, which is Santo Independencia today, Basilica dako kayo, no? Kunya sa Jesuit Church. Here is in town ang cathedral, ang Palasyo Episcopal. And notice nga wala pa cathedral. 1735 mo maning time nga mo reklamo sila, cathedral ko mura og kamalig. Kahoy ra ang walls, walay manimba, kaya adto manimba sa simbahan sa Jesuit. Wapang asa man sang Liga Church. Supposed to be here, beyond the ciudad, the Spanish ciudad. Ang Spanish naman nga area gipakita. Now, so even the property where the Santo Niño stands, there was an affidavit kay gikan pa sa time ni Legazpi. Gibayran mo gid nila, no? When the Santo Niño was discovered. Part man ni sa kingdom ni Subuano ni Tupas. Gibayaran nila apparently ang owner, and then gi-recall nila in 1736 ang properties, no? An affidavit said grant to the city in favor of the convent of the Holy Child on lot and extensions where the convent was built. So gasigi gyud recall of properties ang Santo Niño. Grabe kay records keeping kay naanya mo angkon sa property later, no? Now this is the important thing that I will show you. This is in the handwriting of Fray Julian Bermejo, or as the Spaniards would say, Fray Julian Bermejo, no? When you're in Bayanon, my God, kalisod sabton. Mas kay istorya kinat sila. Anyway, now here he writes ang nagabuhat sa singbahan, no, sa Santo Niño I think Pueblo de Boloon, ang mga buhat sa singbahan sa Senyor Santo Niño nga mga tao sa bisita sa Oslob sa 4 ka tuig og 7 ka bulan maokeni kutob sa bulan sa Hulyo sa tuig nga 1734 ug hasta sa bulan sa Febrero sa tuig 1739, no? Kana Agi Maninicuan. I think this is the handwriting of, because I've seen the letters of Bermejo in Museo Naval, no, where he talks of the building of the watchtowers south, north, around. It looks like this. And if you're from Boloon, you're from Argao, you're from San Nicolas, and you're looking for your relatives, look, they might be the same people here who rendered service for 3 years, 4 years to help build the Santo Niño Church today. No? Na mga apelido din nga familiar, labi na sa Boloon, kana mga Romero, Mendez, nana diri. No? Karaan kay nga mga apelido na. But most apelyidos here are Binisaya. Tokmo, Linoig, Lindog, kuno atong mga Binisaya. No? Nana diri. Nadaghan kaayo. Nasa uban kinat sila na. Okay. No? Consult that. It's at the Cebuano Study Center. Interesting. And then you have 1817. Beautiful book. Very thick. 346 pages. If you're studying the properties of the basilica, how much they own, what was the rental, what was the size, no? Pago, pilay utang, kinsay utangan. This is a book of accounts. 346 pages. Here is an example from, I think, Minglanilla. And you have the names of people, you know, how much the rental is, what's the size of the property. I think Maulis yan. No? Yeah. Kasi gaabang yan. Kasi yung mga samuhante, mantingalin. The one renting, Diego Eleuterio. No? Kunya, kinsa ang mga samuhante, I think, that are also subcontracting on the property of the hacienda, the Talisay Milimilia sa Augustinians. No? And then 1884, 264 pages, manuscripts and documents of the Santo Niño Convent. These are all notarized because at this time, as I said earlier, around the 1800s, 1860s, the city of Cebu, the Cabildo, they restored ayuntamiento, restored after the opening of Cebu to world trade, ning pick up ang ekonomiya sa Cebu, nabalik ang konseho, ang Cabildo, or the ayuntamiento, the city council. Unya ang unang nila mga question, anong bisag asa tapadulong kung Santo ni Agustino may tag-iyas yuta? So there are all these kinds of questions, and here the Augustinians were able to present all these documents. Na di man namo kinawat, puro man ni donated to us, inheritance, some were purchased, some up to 1565, even where the Santo Niño stands, we paid for the property to buy the Indio that owned it para matukuran na mo ning simbahan. So, kumplito ilang records. Marang wala gid ka file og kaso ang Cabildo, ang city government. Sige lang sila yaw-yaw. Uy, ano gulong taon ni? Sige lang taon. Suya lang sila. Ana, no? So, manuscripts and documents of the Santo Niño Convent, notarized copies, this is some of the contents. No? There's a testimonio literal de la Real sentenciada y pronunciada por las señores presidentes y oidores de la Real Audiencia, por parte del convento de señores agustinos y de la colegio señores Ildefonso de la Compañía de Jesús, the Old College of San Ildefonso. Morning 1769, kaya tagana, unsay na itabo, 1769. If you know your history, 1767, gi-order ang expulsion of the Jesuits in the French and Spanish Dominion. And 1768, and the order arrived around May 1769 in the Philippines, and immediately all the Jesuits were informed within a week or two. They were all informed that they have to leave everything. Nagi alferes, nagi sundalo, abri derechos convento, biyahe tanang mga butang. Ang imorang sinina og imong mga personal, bilin tanan, yan nag-inventaryo dayon sa mga butang, yan nag-hearing for the transfer of the properties to the Augustinians. No? The campus, of course, was nalata, run down for 10 years, and then Bishop Arevalo, Dominican Bishop Rubio Arevalo, I think, yeah, Martin Rubio, if I'm not mistaken, or Miguel, wrote the King of Spain to request that naglata naman lang ng campus sa kapit sa Plaza Independencia. We would like to open a seminary. So it was granted in 1779. The seminary opened 3 years later with Dominican teachers. It was called Real Seminary San Carlos. I think this contains some of the inventories of the properties of the Jesuits. Sige, waringan ako, mataas na kaya ako istorya. Okay. So, there's another document. Well, this is the content of the document. Authorized copies of book on rice paddies, mga humayan, farmlands, inhabitants, the estates of the Santo Niño. Book on farmlands among the contents of the Hacienda de Talisay pertinent to the Santo Niño convent with specific names of tenants renting them. General census of the farms of Lipata, Minglanilla. So, Minglanilla ka, tukod kag museum, niya ra imong ma-display. Niya tanang lista sa mga tao diha sa Lipata, Minglanilla. No? Census of the farms. Status and improvements of the Talisay and Manila lands, 1735. Transcribed to this book in 1817, since the book of estate was already in bad condition. No? Okay, that's Spanish, my English translation of the Spanish indice or index. An example from that book. Farm lot sizes under Hacienda de Talisay, pertinent to the Santo Niño convent with specific names of tenants in them. So you have here cacao aral. No, atal? No. So en este año de 1735, nabaya na kayo. Seguro, according to the so 25 pesos by kuan ang bayad ang habang anak. So for gitanuman og kakao. So si Ma'am Raquel Cho would be interested ani kay ingon ba nila the best cacao kuno was grown in Cebu. Niya day dapit sa Talisay. Then the Cavaserias de Talisay. No? Y modo de pagar los terasgos, the method of payment for the properties. No? Kay ang abot ani pwede man bayad in kind, bayad in coin, in metal. And then may mapa sa mga properties nana. Here's an example of the Estancia de Banilan. No? Bakeros, sobak. Sa bakero, mga cowboy, mga buhig baka. And then ganado is of course cattle, baka. No? So sa Banilan, buhig lang karne, kanang baka para to supply meat to the city. And then and here's another one, it's another file now, various papers on the suppression of the Parian Cebu Parish. So you see, this is part of the documentation of the suppression of the Church of Parian, 1832. Most of those documents are at the National Archives of the Philippines, but also here contained in the APA files. And here is a drawing, one-page file of the San Fernando Church, which was repainted last week. Doon ay murag uproar sa mga tao kay nganong gikuluran og pink ang tower nga kuamanta ni siya kanang colonial colors, no? Kanang soft, kanang kuan ba dili pink. So I think nagadto na ang amuang chairman head sa commission si Father Brian Brigoli, nag-istorya na sa kaparian dito nga kanibalik lang sa color nga katong off-white. Dili lang kayo pink. Okay. Anyway, dali naman na kay mailisan naman dahil pintan. But this is exactly what was constructed. And here is an example, another drawing, one of the few that one of only two that we found in the entire records. This is for a templete, no, for the Santo Niño de Cebu. This looks to me like the Magellan's Cross, but it's already 1889. So it's probably for the Santo Niño, but there's a cross inside, and it almost looks like the kiosk today, but it's metal. Who knows? There was probably a plan 40 years later, 30 years later, 1834 man ang Magellan's kiosk. This is 1889, so you're talking about 55 years later. They probably wanted to replace it with a metal. Something metallic. Apparently, wala ma-approve. No? And here is a repair of the church. Mga expenses that went to about 6,900 pesos for the renovation of the altar mayor, the repair of the altar mayor, the retablo. An important is a big map, very big map, dated 1883, of the properties of the Augustinians in Cebu. And here you find Mabolo, and here is Cebu City. Morally ang Cebu City. That's for San Pedro. This is the entire Cebu City. And look at the property of the Augustinians. Abot sa bukid, no? This is Busay. Kani ka, Busay na ni tanan. So you have Lahog here, Lahog ang spelling. And then you have Banilad, no? Talamban na gid ni karon, this modern day Talamban. Banilad, dagat na ni diri. So you see, and this is what is this? This is the road, that street now, John Paul II Street. Yeah. Sitio de Lahog, that's Mabolo. And what was this for? Because there was a request from the to establish a cemetery at Careta. So this gives us a date of the cemetery of Careta Kanampagbo as against the old cemetery where you have the Señora Pepang monument of the Osmeñas. That's the older cemetery. The new one is the Careta Karon, which is still growing. And here it is still blanco. Wala pa sulod, wala pa diri ang minteryo. Here, tabang. Diri na makita. Divisoria de Mabolo, it was under Mabolo. There's a river, Rio de Candondon, which is now buried under Ayala. Monang naipart sa Ayala nga, drive mo. Mga buwak ng simento, that's probably where the old river or creek used to pass through. No? Mukros na siya, anang na-flyover karon after Ayala. Na niya, ilaw ang river, I think, abot sa, natabunan na sa simento nga dalan, na river mo kawasa, hipodromo, Sitio de Careta. Interesting, huh? And then all these are properties of the Santoria, the Banilad Friar Estates. This would later, John Paul II, and then later sa unahan, would become Salinas Drive. This is the Camino Real de Mandaue, which is today still the national highway to Mandaue, I think. Yeah, a portion of it. Then the claim area. I'm almost done, I think. Now, important in this 1891 document is a list of all the rich people you find today in Cebu. These are your mestizos sangleyes. There are 225 names of them. Names of rentiers, of people renting properties, planting them to sugarcane. Mag-abang ra sa Santo Niño Basilica. What are the sample of the names? I'll give you the first 10 names. No? Luis Cabrera, lolo ni Albert Cabrera diya sa Mandaue. The old ancestral house of the Cabreras are still in the old Camino Real, the old Mandaue highway, which is no longer the new highway today. After you cross AS Fortuna is where the train used to be. So the old highway is kanang in-split bitaw sa Mandaue, San Miguel Beer. Munao ka pa. But that's the old calle. That's the old Camino Real, the royal road of the Spanish period. And then atubangan sa San Miguel, what used to be the railway, niya gipalit, ni dako na imong highway. But if you go to the Camino Real, the old Mandaue highway, which leads to the old ancestral houses of the Uwanos, na galing niya. Ang usas na bilin nga karaan kay 1900s, 1890s. Ang Cabrera House, ang ilang great-grandfather or great-great-grandfather is Don Luis Cabrera, who rented properties in the Hacienda de Banilan. There's Lasso de la Vega, no? Kachila, Mariano Alo, Isabel Climaco, Pedro Javier, Anacleto Duterte, relative ni kaning atong presidente, Digong, no? No, kalibot ko siya nga. Anyway, Maximo Texon, mestizo Chinese. Cecilia Regner of the famous Regner family. No? Herederos de Don Gabino Veloso, the richest man in the late Spanish period. ni Casio Villamor, parinti nilang Manny Camaragumban, o ni Giles Villamor, the PPD, CPD o Municipal Planning and Development Officer at Medellin. No? Mga Villamor nga pamilya naa sa Carmen, naasan sa Balamban, naasan sa Medellin, or ano siya? Gregorio Lagolagos, no? Clemente Alos. There are 225 names. I actually have a list of the names transcribed already, and Dr. Kalinin has. Now, before I end, before I end, we're almost done. A very important set of documents that we were able to find, which I think napay nabilin, is this one. 5 documents that are under the Pueblos y Parroquias records are answers to about 87 questions that were sent by the King of Spain, by the Spanish crown, to the Philippines in preparation for the 1887 Exposition International de Filipinas, the international exposition in Madrid of Philippine products, when every town, every barangay, and there's a series of catalogs of this, of what was sent by every barangay, no, not barangay, every barrio, every municipio, no? Ano nga pa yung municipio na yung time? They would be called pueblo, every barrio. Nagpadalag all kinds of things. No? And they were eventually kept at the Museo de Antropología in Madrid. And if you go to Manila, in Spain, visit the Museo de Antropología, a beautiful collection of 1800s, late 1800s, Philippine products like kanang bamboo nga gi-carve with a scene, with a native scene. My God, I've never seen bamboo so beautiful. Sudan og tobacco. No, it's a lost art. We don't have that anymore. We don't do that anymore. No, ang karabaw nga kuiras kanang mga sa Muslim South, mga sagang panagang nga mga karabaw nga para armor. No? And here is from the town of Toledo, written by 25-year-old Gobernador Silio, the barangay, kasi cabeza de barangay of Toledo, si Juan Climaco, later the second elected governor of the province of Cebu. He was 25 years old when he wrote this. I have an article about this particular document, which is about 63 pages, where he answers each of the questions and adds some more. No? Banata na niya nga, anong walay dalan, padung sa Toledo, nalay dalan mo, improve yun ni ang lot sa Toledo. And you know what he did when he became governor? He asked the American government to build the Cebu-Toledo Road, and it was finished during his second term, 1907. Sadly, he died in 1909, bata kayo kay tungod sa iyang sakit during the revolution and during the war against the Americans. Siya og si Maxilo may gadala sa war against the Americans. They were the leading heads of the guerrilla, the Filipino army. The other one is not so thick. It's 34 pages. It's not as well written as this one. Climaco dedicates this to the governor of Cebu, the alcalde mayor. But iyang banatan ang Espanyol. Grabe ni ka-honest nga presentation. No? Because gi-course through di ay ang tanang request through the religious orders. Mo nang natago ni nga copy. And it would have been a part, at a copy would have been exhibited at the 1887 exposition in the Sala de los Pueblos or something, exhibition from the towns. No? Here from Oslo, and this is where I discovered that kana di ang gitawag karong kwartel sa Oslo is the Oslo Municipal Hall or is the Oslo Tribunal. Kay gisuwat na din nila nga wa mahuman kay ang pare nga bangkiitan kayo nagtukod sa tanang mga dalan sa Oslo padung sa kabukiran, girecall gidala sa Seminario de la Vid, the Seminary of the Great of the Vine sa Spain, ug nahunong ang construction sa building, and I think maugid na ang construct imutanaw ka sa Oslo nga kwartel, kanang gihong kwartel di infanteria, kay naglibog ko anong maabot man ang army diri sa Oslo. Nga naman sila kwartel di infanteria sa Argao. No? Niya namin ako kay fort sa daang lungsod sa Argao. Adto ang kwartel. So if you look at the Dalagete municipio today and you compare it with that so-called quartel, maugid siyang construction pareho gid og now. Mas dako lang gid ang sa Oslo. Inana ka, gamhanan to nga pare, no? And then in Cebu nga, 4 pages lang. Mga pare gi-assign ani niya, ang uban ilang gi-assign og like sa time ni Climac o sa kang Climac gi-assign nila Gobernador Silio. But all the rest pare ang tupag. Kini tapulan kay pare tubag like no, nada, wala every question. No. So gamay ra gyud kay mo may bawaan sa Cebu nga. Kay ang tubag ani nga pare. I think Padre Melgar tapulan mong kaayo eh. No? May pa ang Danau. 16 pages gitubag sa pare. Kanunay ko nung mabahaan ang Danau. Duha ko nung naka-reverse. Ga-cross mo ang problema gid kay sa Danau. Kanunay, of course, that's why it's called Danau. Kay pond. It's a wetland. No? Nindot kayo na statistics. Yeah. All of this, you will see, they don't like the Chinese. Banat na sa mga insect. Rapacious kuno kayo. Mangingilad sa mga nitibo. So grabe yung ka-anti-Chinese ang tuwan. To the point ng mga below the belt, ng mga description nila sa insect. May kuno kayo gising-gising kuno kung magpautang niya. Kung binayranay na, maldito kayo. I don't think inana ang insect. No, but anyway, may tanaws ka sila. Nakoy bias. And then you have the Elección de Pueblo of Naga. The Governor General Mariano Ricafort signs this document, informs the approval, I think, is sent to the Augustinians who run the Pueblo of the parish of Naga. So this is actually a 5-page document of the establishment of the town of Naga. No? Erección de Pueblo de Naga. Yeah. Signed by, you can see the signature here on the last page. It's signed by Mariano Ricafort. It's addressed to the parish priest. And then the provincial of the Augustinians. And then the last one is Misiones, which is a very thick book, about 300 pages. But there's only 5 Misiones, so all the missions of the Augustinians. The thickest portion is Pampanga, Misión de Pampanga. And the thinnest one is Misión de Cebu. 1694 on the state of Christianity in Cebu, mga pilay gibunyag, pilay mga inana. And then next to that is Panay, also about 5 or 10 pages mupos kayo. And then it's Pampanga. So pasig taga Pampanga nga friar ang nasulat na takas kay story about the mission in Pampanga. Now, before I end, if you're looking for books that were collected by Eduardo Navarro, Fray Navarro, then you consult this book by Helen Tubangi, the 1974. She was chair of the Department of Anthropology at Ateneo. Ateneo de Manila University. This was a 1956 cataloging of the collection, and it contains all the books, not necessarily just manuscripts, but all the books at the Biblioteca of the Augustinians, also in the monasterio. So that's a different one compared to the one we're doing. We've done. And then imagine all the records of Pampanga, of the other missions, no, of Laguna, and all that. They've not been digitized. Well, I don't know if there is a digitization project, but there was supposed to be for the National Archives. And hatag na mo ang records nila kay nahuman na ang Cebu. But I can imagine, my God, this will take years to carry out. No? Now, my good friend Ricky Jose also published Impreso, which is about all the Spanish documents, books printed that he could find in Spain and also in the Philippines, I think, which runs to about 2,800. Helen Tubangi, if I recall, also runs to about 1,800 books. But there's very little on Cebu. Only the Redondo book, the Breve Reseña, is listed in the catalog of Valladolid and also in the Impreso. Now, if you want to go to the other archives, you should buy the book Guía de Fuentes Manuscritos para la Historia de Filipinas, conservadas in España, published in 1998. I have a copy, but I can't find it. The copy they sell at the archivo the Ministry that handles these archives, no, Ministry of Information, I think. Blue ni siyang ubos dili pula. So this must be an older copy. I can't find man. But at least all the archives that contain records of the Philippines, not necessarily of Cebu. So it's still very difficult. No? And then for further readings, you should buy a copy of Cortes Alonso Vicente Cortes's book La Escrita y lo Escrito, Paleografía de España. Because according to Una Paredes, she has a copy. Naa siya at the back, ang pinaka-importante, and Dr. Paredes mentions this in her article, which you can actually view online. That the appendix are abbreviations used during the 16th, 17th, 18th century. So that di na ka isod og sabot. Kung naay mga katay-katay, adat. Ay mo makita, di ra og kung sa kaning uban, adat. So naa siya explanation na. Now, if you're going to access the records at the Cebuano Study Center that we digitized, I would like to ask you to first read Dr. Paredes' taga-Surigao ni article, Working with Spanish Colonial Records and Archives, Reflections and Practicalities. When you go to Spain, and then if you really need knowledge, because according to her, and I agree, you don't need to speak Spanish or know all the Spanish words. As Cebuanos, 20% of our 10% of our words are already Spanish. That is a good start. No? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You say Lunes, Martes, Miércoles, all that. Sabado, no? Otra vez, pero, no? So kasabot na gamay. Kung ibaw lang ka kung mga pagmangkot kay di mo kasabot og Miyerkules kay the next generation, kaning millennial generation, lahi naman og. Di man kasabot og Lunes, Martes, Miyerkules, Huwebes. English naman Monday so. Ay na sila. But kitang mga tiguang o mga amaldi kayo tiguang, mga nag-approach pa lang og 30 years old like me. Pwede gid mo kay makahinumdum pag imong Spanish words ninyo. And then also, this can be downloaded, Munoz Rivero's very old Manual de Paleografía Diplomática. It's in Spanish, but it tells you may mga examples of what kind, because eskwelahan man ang writing, pa-eskwelahon man na sila ka-specific ways of writing. Unsa ang pagbasa sa 1600s ka document compared to the 1700s inana. No, anong inana ang style of writing. He explains there in Spanish. It's in PDF form. You can download it. If it won't appear here, you just type Munoz Manual Paleografía Diplomática PDF. Mugawas na on Google. Also, Paredes Spanish Colonial Records on Google. Mugawas na. This one, you have to buy. Okay. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you enjoyed this virtual tour of the records of the archives in the Augustinian archives, which you can actually access at the Cebuano Study Center if you follow all the protocols required for entry at the University of San Carlos. Thank you very much.
Daghang salamat, Sir Jobers. We are overwhelmed actually by the collection, and it's such a treasure trove. And Sir, kung imo nihing basahon tanan niya, imong studyhan tanan, usa tingali ni ka lifetime or more. Unya.
Or more. You need about 500 years to finish.
Another 500 years.
Rafi, your head of Rafi Cultural Heritage Program. Rafi should really buy a digital machine and go to Spain and digitize that.
And the remaining na lang, sir, kaya na naman Cebuano Studies.
You have lots of money. You can't do that. We should talk about translating these documents.
Yes, sir. Yeah. But sir, Jobers, we ask, there are actually questions in the chat box, and there are a good number of them. So maybe we can just run through this quickly lang because we have time limitations, no? Quickly lang, sir. From Nathaniel Ramos, is it possible for us to download these photos or documents?
Cebuano Study Center will answer that. We don't have permission from the Augustinian archives to post this. It's going to be the Augustinian archives that should do that.
Yeah.
That should do that. Once they've seen our digitized versions, it's their property. We have no right to do that.
Yeah, pero
Unless
naunhan ni mo sir og digitize.
we send the digital CDs to them. It should be there. The
Okay.
copies.
Anyway, sir, from Maria Kim, I think you answered this because she asked this question before you actually answered this, but nevertheless, how did the phrase or the frailes got all the lands? Did they buy it from the people or did they just title untitled lands?
These were donations. These were inheritance and donations. Ikaw ba'y
Okay.
naisang ninyo magmilagro, di ka mo donate.
Oh, mo gyud.
Ano, mag-donate pa ang mga tao sa museum. Magdagan kayong mga alahas, ipang bilin dito. Nga mga tao karon kuripot na, di na mo donate og yuta sa Santo Niño. Donate na mo. I-donate na ninyo yung mga condo units.
Okay, Ruben Jeffrey Ascension, thank you for the question. He's just asking, sir, if you found this in the documents. When was Lahug inhabited?
Well, Lahog was inhabited in the pre-colonial period. There would have been natives already there. No, there would have been natives. But if you're talking of when was Lahog identified in the Spanish records, you will find it there in the Augustinian records.
There you go.
Lahog, L-A-J-O-G. Apparently, it's pronounced Lahog.
Lahog.
Lahog ba? Lahog? Lahog. Kasi no, kasi supplier nagpagkaon sa city, tiglahog na.
Tiglawg. Anyway, what to give out? Jennifer Abdani. Anyway, sir, Jennifer Abdani asks, where can we access primary sources about Parian Church? She found kuno secondary ones. Bisudan ko siya primary sources.
So, what was that? Paaspe?
Asa kuno ang mga primary sources on the Parian Church. Interested siya sa Parian Church.
The primary sources on the Parian Church, especially on the cases filed, are at the National Archives of the Philippines and also in Spain, in the Archivo Histórico Nacional, the National Archives, Historical Archives.
Okay.
Duha man silang state yun nga archives. Archivo General de Indias is from the early period to the 1700s. Kanang AHN, Archivo Histórico Nacional, mga 1800s na nga records. Ang atong problem sa National Archives of the Philippines, gidala sa Spaniards ang records before 1800. There's very little in the National Archives that dates before 1800. So kining parian nga problem, nagsugod ni 1830s man, makita nimo sa National Archives of the Philippines. All the records before that, adto ko kag Espanya, adto ka sa Archivo General de Indias. And you can actually access some of the records online kay the Ministro de Fomento, I think, Ministry sa Spain, ang tanan nilang archives, kutangan ng mga websites and there are digital nga mga versions you can access.
There you go. So that's where you can find your primary sources, Miss Abdani. From Fitz Gigi, are the research findings in the Spanish archive enough to narrate Cebu's history during the 1700s?
No, I don't think so. It's enough to narrate the history of the growth and development of the Basilica, of the Santo Niño,
Yes.
of the Talisay Minglanilla estate. But the political affairs of the city, of the civil affairs, they're not there. They're not there. Wala, so we just don't know. Kinsay, namusil ni Kinsa, Kinsa mga chismis, they're not there. Hindi mo na chismis ang pare, wala na dito. No? Kinsay nakabuntis, ane, kinsay hilas kayo diri nga alkalde mayor. Those records of what goes on in Fort San Pedro, unsa ka batik kinaiya ani nga governor, not appear in this record.
Okay. Sir, naipangutana si EB, Itorma Michael. Was there a mention about the uprising in Cebu, in Misiones, Cebu?
No, it's only the expansion of Christianity, puro bunyag. 5 ka pages. There is an uprising of San Nicolas of 1571. It is in one of the records. It's discussed in an early record on the uprising of San Nicolas of 1571. Alzamiento of San Nicolas.
All right. This one, sir, I did not get a chance to read this kay karon siya ning pop up, but this is a question from Joseph Solis Alcaide Aberice. I do believe that we Cebuanos and the Filipinos in general are somewhat not quite knowledgeable about our Spanish or pre-Spanish colonial history because only a few Filipinos are literate with the Spanish language, let alone speaking or writing in the said language. Do you think we Cebuanos or Filipinos in general should learn Spanish again, not just for mere digesting of historical records according to the lenses of the Spanish language, but also to communicate with present-day Spaniards and Latin America through making Spanish as one of the subjects again in the elementary level? What do you think, sir?
I think it should be an option to those who want to learn Spanish. I went through 12 units of Spanish. It was difficult because at the time, God, when I was studying Spanish, it was just an adjunct, an elective course. No, fortunately, I came from the Zamboanga Peninsula where Chabacano is spoken in Zamboanga. It may not be walang no hay conjugación, pero you can still converse. Masabtan ka pag abot nimo sa Spain. Remember, by the way, you have to understand Latin American Spanish is different from our Castilian Spanish. Ako kay nagdiferensya, no? So I think it should be an option to those who want to learn Spanish. Let's not burden everyone because not everyone wants to be a historian and wants to lose your hair. So only those who want to learn. No? And that could be a potential. Ang mga call centers, nabiya sila gipang-hire nga interpreters ang amotok in Spanish. Kasagaran, taga Chabaka, taga Zamboanga. I know one, si Ferdinand Azcaraga. He is head now of a call center, team leader or something. And this is Spanish, I think. Or I may be mistaken. But I know that Cervantes in Manila, Instituto magkawas akong pagkakinat silang pronunciation. Instituto de Cervantes. Okay. Nag-training na sila og Spanish na certificate nya kasagaran mo graduate na mo trabaho call center as in kanang mo speak og Spanish.
Para
so
cater to Spanish calls.
Kung interesado ka. Now, ang advice, universities should offer Spanish as an option for those in history. Kanang Department of History namo should have 24 or 100 units of Spanish.
Should have, sir, so wala gi-offer karon. I-offer.
I'm not sure. Wala naman tingali mo tudlog Spanish. Kunya, ang problem ang sa history is it's just Spanish. There's American history. So kung estudyante kag history, di ka kaya Spanish.
Ato ka American.
Revolution, history of revolution kay binisaya ang katipunan. Or ato gas ko ana. So depende na gina sa option sa estudyante. If you want to learn about Spanish period, then learn the language. It's never too late.
Agree, sir. It should be an elective. There's a last question nga gipahabol din sir, but I think you sort of answered this ganiha. The first, it says here, from NVRM, are there chances we can get copies of the digitized documents through email? So dito na nasa Cebuano Study Center sila. Or dito sa... Anyway, I think these are all the questions, and we'd like to thank Dr. Bersales for answering all of them quickly and straightforward. And I don't know if you have other questions. You may feel free to message us about the Study Center page on Facebook, and we might just forward it to Dr. Bersales for him to answer. And now, to show our deepest appreciation to our esteemed lecturer, we'd like to present to him the Certificate of Appreciation for his time off his busy schedule, left and right bookings, to impart unto us this knowledge of a thriving the collection that we have in the Cebu Study Center. We didn't even know about this until now, and how so many things we can actually find there about our history. So may I read the Certificate of Appreciation to Dr. Jose Eleazar Bersales for his lecture entitled The Cebu Records in the Augustinian Archives during the Vicente Sotto Lecture Series 2021, given this day, 27th day of February 2021, via Zoom, signed the USC Vice President for Academic Affairs, Father Hisraj Antoniapen, SVD, PhD, and Hope Sabanpanyu, PhD, Director of Cebuano Studies Center. Daghan kaayong salamat, Sir Jobers. Virtual round of applause for Sir Jobers.
Thank you.
Before we wrap up things, I'd like to remind everyone, please do not forget to fill out the evaluation form. The link, I just saw the link a while ago. I think they'll post again the link to the chat. It's in the chat box, and you can avail of your certificate of participation for this event. Don't forget that our next month's installation for our lecture series will be about Datu Lapu-Lapu, a cinematic character study, and our speaker will be Mr. Dennis Hudilia. I think he chatted a while ago. So Mr. Hudilia is here. He's thanking also Dr. Bersales for a great lecture. Daghan kaayong salamat. Watch out for that. And so we've reached the end of our program. Before we go, again, your evaluation, please, evaluation forms. And this is a part that I think everyone really likes. The photo op. Can we switch on our videos for a group photo? For those, of course, who has something else to attend right now, please, it's okay to leave already the meeting. Okay, pag-smile. I don't know who's taking the picture.
I will take it.
Post ako sa Facebook.
Okay, post yun na, Sir Jobers. Swipe alta yun na.
Please turn on all your videos. 1, 2, 3. Smile. Next one.
Anas Ma'am Loy, oh.
1, 2, 3. Smile. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone,
Thank you.
for attending this lectures, this installment, and we hope to see you in the succeeding lectures. Okay. Naidaghang kaila ni Sir Joe Burstina. Anyway, I hope we learned a lot today. Have a pleasant weekend, everyone. See you in March for the next installment. Bye. Daghang salamat.
Thank you.